Millionaire abandoned his wife for being infertile. 5 years later, he finds her with twin girls. Emily adjusted her blouse in front of the mirror, her eyes lingering on the slight bags forming under her eyes. She sighed, brushing them away with concealer. Another doctor's appointment had come and gone, and as always, she carried the weight of its implications alone. Nathan refused to join her. The morning sunlight streamed through their kitchen window as Emily placed a steaming mug of coffee on the counter. Nathan was already there, scrolling through his phone, his tie loosely hanging around his neck. "Dr. Peterson said everything's normal on my end," Emily began cautiously, her voice soft but trembling slightly. She was always careful with her words these days, like stepping around shards of glass that could cut her at any moment. Nathan barely looked up. "That's good to hear," he muttered, his tone betraying a lack of interest. Emily hesitated, then pressed on. "Nathan, maybe it's time you—" "Don't," he interrupted sharply, setting his phone down with an audible thud. His blue eyes, once so full of warmth, now bore into her with an icy edge. "We've talked about this." "No, you've talked about this," she countered, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. "I've gone to every appointment, every test. It's been years, Nathan. Don't you think it's fair—" "I don't need to be tested," he snapped, cutting her off again. "There's nothing wrong with me, Emily. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if—" "If what? If I wasn't the problem?" She finished for him, her voice trembling now with a mix of frustration and pain. Nathan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," Emily whispered. The tension between them was suffocating. This had become their routine, quiet mornings filled with unspoken resentment, evenings spent avoiding each other in the same house, and nights of lying back-to-back in a bed that once felt like a sanctuary. Emily looked at him, searching for the man she married, the man who once promised her the world, but all she saw was the reflection of her own unhappiness. Later that evening, Emily sat alone in the living room, her laptop perched on her knees. She scrolled through forum posts about infertility and support groups, seeking comfort in the stories of strangers. Her hand absently rested on her stomach, as if willing it to hold the life she had dreamed of for so long. Nathan walked in, his face lit by the glow of his phone. "What are you doing?" he asked casually, as though they hadn't fought that morning. "Just reading," she replied, her tone neutral. "Look, Emily, I know this has been hard on you," he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost apologetic. "But maybe we're just not meant to have kids." Her heart sank. The words hit her like a blow. He said it so casually, as if their dreams of starting a family were as disposable as yesterday's news. "Nathan," she began, her voice shaking, "do you even want this anymore? Do you even want us anymore?" Nathan hesitated, his silence speaking louder than any words could. In the weeks that followed, their marriage deteriorated further. Nathan's refusal to address their issues became a wall that Emily couldn't climb. The blame he placed on her for their struggles was a weight she could no longer carry. One evening, Nathan came home late, his tie loosened and his expression distant. Emily was waiting for him in the living room, a cup of tea untouched on the table. "We need to talk," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. Emily felt her chest tighten. She already knew what was coming. "I think it's time we ended this," Nathan said bluntly. "We're not happy. We haven't been for a long time." Her vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "So, that's it? You're giving up?" "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic," he replied, his tone matter-of-fact. Realistic. The word echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. Was it realistic to expect a marriage to weather storms when only one person was willing to fight for it? That night, as Emily sat alone in the quiet of their once shared home, she allowed herself to cry. She cried for the love they had lost, for the family they would never be, and for the woman she had become, tired, broken, and yearning for something more. But as the tears dried, a new emotion began to take hold. Determination. If Nathan wasn't willing to fight for their dreams, she would fight for her own. Somewhere deep inside her, a small flame of hope still burned. It was time to stoke it into a fire, The house felt colder without Nathan's presence, though Emily knew it wasn't his absence she mourned. It was the weight of what could have been. The papers were signed, the lawyers exchanged pleasantries, and just like that, their 6 years of marriage were reduced to a stamped document and a goodbye that lacked emotion. The first days after the divorce were a blur. Emily spent hours staring at the ceiling, her mind looping through memories that alternated between love and pain. But soon, survival instincts kicked in. She forced herself out of bed, into the shower, and out into the world she hadn't faced alone in years. Emily found herself at a small cafe one morning, her hands wrapped around a mug of herbal tea. Across from her sat Mia, her younger sister, who radiated a confidence that Emily envied. "Okay," Mia began, tucking her blonde hair behind her ear. "He's gone. What now?" Emily let out a short, humorless laugh. "What now? I have no idea, Mia. Everything I thought my life would be is gone." Mia reached across the table, squeezing Emily's hand. "Then maybe it's time to think about what you want. Forget Nathan, forget the marriage. What do you want for Emily?" The question lingered in Emily's mind long after their conversation. What did she want? For so long, her identity had been tied to Nathan's approval and the shared dream of a family. Now, with that chapter closed, she had no idea who she was without him. Days turned into weeks, and the ache of loss slowly dulled into a background hum. One evening, as she flipped through the results of her recent fertility tests, she paused on the words, "All results within normal range." The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. She wasn't the problem, she never had been. For years, Nathan had planted seeds of doubt in her mind, making her believe she was the reason they couldn't conceive. The anger bubbled up, hot and sharp, but with it came something else, a sense of liberation. Emily set the papers down, her heart racing. She didn't need Nathan to build the life she wanted. If motherhood was still her dream, she would pursue it on her own terms. Emily's first appointment with the fertility specialist felt surreal. The doctor, a warm and empathetic woman named Dr. Harper, walked her through the process with patience and care. "Insemination is a common choice for single women who want to have children," Dr. Harper explained. "We'll start with some preliminary steps, and then you can choose a donor based on your preferences." The idea of selecting a donor felt strange at first, but as Emily scrolled through profiles in the weeks that followed, she found herself strangely comforted by the process. Each profile represented a piece of her future, a future she was finally taking control of. At work, Emily's colleagues began to notice the shift in her demeanor. She was more focused, more decisive. Ryan, a co-worker and longtime friend who worked in the hospital's legal department, was the first to comment. "You seem different," he said one afternoon as they shared a coffee break in the hospital courtyard. Emily smiled faintly. "Different how?" "I don't know. Lighter, maybe. Like you're finally letting go of something heavy." She shrugged, but the truth was, he was right. For the first time in years, she felt like she was breathing fresh air. When the day of the insemination finally came, Emily sat in the clinic's waiting room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mia sat beside her, a calming presence. "You've got this," Mia whispered, nudging her gently. Emily nodded, her throat tight with emotion. This was it, the beginning of a new chapter. The procedure itself was quick and uneventful, but as Emily lay on the table, staring up at the ceiling, a single thought filled her mind. "I'm doing this for me." The weeks that followed were filled with nervous anticipation. Emily threw herself into work, avoiding overanalyzing every twinge and ache. Then, one crisp morning, she stood in her bathroom, holding a pregnancy test in trembling hands. 2 lines. She stared at the test, her heart pounding in her chest. Tears streamed down her face as the reality set in. She was pregnant. Not just pregnant, pregnant with twins, as the first ultrasound later confirmed. Ella and Victoria. She had already chosen their names, whispering them into the quiet of her bedroom at night like a prayer. That evening, as Emily sat by her window, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her life was far from what she had imagined, but in its own way it was beautiful. She was no longer the woman who clung to the approval of a man who refused to see her worth. She was a woman who had fought for her dreams, who had chosen herself. And for the first time in years, Emily felt whole. The faint sound of rain pattered against the window as Emily sat in the nursery, surrounded by soft pastel walls and furniture she had assembled with Mia's help. In the corner stood a pair of identical cribs, still waiting for the arrival of Ella and Victoria. Emily ran her hand over the edge of one, a bittersweet smile on her lips. The journey to this moment had been anything but easy. The whispers at work, the unsolicited advice from acquaintances, the disapproving glances from people who still clung to traditional ideas of family, all of it had tested her resolve. But Emily had learned to tune out the noise. She was building something for herself, something no one could take away. One evening, Emily met Ryan for coffee after work. The cafe was warm and bustling with chatter, a welcome contrast to the chilly autumn air outside. Ryan, ever the sharp observer, noticed her growing belly immediately. "So," he began, leaning back in his chair with a teasing grin, "are you finally going to tell me what's been going on, or do I have to guess?" Emily laughed, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. "I guess it's kind of obvious now, isn't it?" Ryan's eyes softened. "I'm happy for you, Emily. Really. You deserve this." His words, simple but heartfelt, brought a lump to her throat. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Their friendship had been a lifeline during her darkest days. Ryan's steady presence, his humor, and his unwavering support had reminded her that she wasn't alone, even when she felt like the world was against her. As the months passed, Emily's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She juggled work, doctor's appointments, and preparations for the twins' arrival with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. But not everything was easy. One day, while grocery shopping, an older woman struck up a conversation with her in the checkout line. "Oh, twins, how wonderful," the woman exclaimed, noticing Emily's prominent bump. "Is your husband excited?" Emily hesitated, the familiar pang of discomfort returning. "I'm doing this on my own," she said, forcing a polite smile. The woman's expression faltered for a moment before she recovered. "Well, that's brave of you," she said, her tone dripping with pity. Emily left the store with her head held high, but the encounter lingered. Why was it so hard for people to accept that a woman could choose this path for herself? On a cold December morning, Emily went into labor earlier than expected. Mia was by her side in the hospital, her steady presence calming Emily through the chaos. Ryan arrived shortly after, bringing a bag of essentials Emily hadn't thought to pack in her rush to the hospital. Hours later, Ella and Victoria entered the world. As Emily held her daughters for the first time, tears streamed down her face. They were perfect, tiny, delicate, and utterly hers. "You did it," Mia whispered, her own eyes glistening with tears. Ryan stood near the door, a quiet smile on his face, as he watched the scene unfold. "They're beautiful, Emily," he said softly. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the weeks that followed, Emily adjusted to life as a single mother. Sleepless nights and endless feedings tested her patience, but the sight of Ella and Victoria's tiny faces made every challenge worth it. Ryan became a constant presence, stopping by to bring groceries, fix things around the house, or simply hold one of the twins while Emily rested. Mia was equally supportive, often spending her evenings helping Emily fold laundry or prepare meals. One evening, as Emily and Ryan sat on the couch with the twins asleep in their cribs, she turned to him with a grateful smile. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Ryan shrugged, a hint of playfulness in his expression. "I told you I'd always have your back, and besides, I kind of like hanging out with you." Emily laughed, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine the possibility of something more between them. But just as Emily began to settle into her new life, an unexpected phone call disrupted her fragile sense of peace. "Emily, it's Nathan," the voice on the other end said. Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't spoken to him since the divorce, and hearing his voice again was like reopening a wound she thought had healed. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone clipped. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "It's important." Emily's heart raced as she hung up, her mind spinning with questions. What could he possibly want after all this time? Whatever it was, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't the same woman Nathan had left behind. Emily paced the living room, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. Nathan's voice echoed in her mind. "I need to talk to you. It's important." She replayed the words, trying to decipher their meaning. What could he possibly have to say now, after walking away so easily? Ella and Victoria's soft cries came through the baby monitor, pulling her back to the present. She took a deep breath, placed the phone on the counter, and went to her daughters. Sitting in the dimly lit nursery, rocking Ella in her arms, Emily resolved not to let Nathan disrupt the life she had worked so hard to rebuild, but curiosity gnawed at her. The next afternoon, Emily met Nathan at a small park cafe. It was neutral ground, far from the ghosts of their shared past. She arrived early, her nerves thrumming as she stirred a cup of chamomile tea. Nathan appeared moments later, his usually confident posture noticeably subdued. He hesitated before sitting, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for the woman he once knew. "You look good," he said awkwardly. Emily folded her arms, her expression guarded. "What do you want, Nathan?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't really know how to start this, but I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air, foreign and unfamiliar. Emily's eyes narrowed, suspicion rising. An apology? For what? "For everything," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "For blaming you, for not listening, for not being the husband you deserved." Emily blinked, caught off guard. She had spent so long imagining what she would say if Nathan ever showed remorse, but now that the moment had arrived, she found herself speechless. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why now?" Nathan hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of the table. I got married again," he began, his voice strained. "We've been trying to have kids, but nothing's worked. We went through tests, and—" The pause stretched, heavy with meaning. "And?" Emily pressed, her voice sharper now. "And I'm infertile," he finished, the words tumbling out like a confession. Emily's breath hitched. She stared at him, her mind racing. All those years, his accusations, his refusal to get tested, the way he had made her feel like she was broken, it had all been for nothing. "I don't even know what to say," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you put me through? How much you made me doubt myself?" Nathan's head hung low, his shoulders slumped. "I know. I can't take it back, Emily, but I thought you deserved to know the truth. I was wrong. About everything." The words were a small balm on a deep wound, but they couldn't erase the scars. Emily sat back, crossing her arms. "Why tell me now? Are you looking for forgiveness?" Nathan shook his head. "No, I'm not asking for anything. I wanted to try to make things right, even if it's too late." Emily studied him, the man who had once been her whole world. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or sadness. She felt pity. "You're right, Nathan. It is too late," she said, her voice steady. "I've moved on. I've built a life for myself, a family, and I don't need you to make it right. I already have." As Emily drove home, the encounter replayed in her mind. She felt lighter, as if the last remnants of Nathan's shadow had finally lifted. Later that evening, she shared the conversation with Mia and Ryan, who listened intently as she recounted the details. "Unbelievable," Mia said, shaking her head. "After all this time, he finally admits he was wrong. Classic Nathan, late to the party as usual." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "How do you feel about it?" Emily paused, considering the question. "Free," she said finally. "I don't need his validation. I've spent enough time grieving the life we didn't have. Now I'm focused on the life I do have." Ryan's lips curved into a small smile. "That's the Emily I know." Nathan's confession did more than close a chapter for Emily. It also served as a catalyst for his own journey. Consumed by guilt, he began channeling his energy into something productive. With the help of his new wife, he founded an organization dedicated to supporting couples struggling with infertility. Though his efforts were genuine, Nathan couldn't shake the nagging sense of regret that lingered. He attended the opening event of his foundation with a polite smile, but deep down, he knew that no amount of redemption could undo the pain he had caused. Meanwhile, Emily continued to thrive. With Mia and Ryan's unwavering support, she navigated the challenges of raising twins with grace and resilience. The late-night feedings, the endless diaper changes, and the exhaustion were all worth it when she saw Ella and Victoria's smiles. Ryan's presence in her life began to take on a new dimension. He was more than a friend now. He was a partner in every way but name. The realization came one quiet evening as they sat on the porch watching the twins sleep through the baby monitor. "I couldn't have done this without you," Emily said softly, her hand brushing against his. Ryan turned to her, his expression serious. "You would have found a way. You always do." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future with him. A future filled with love, trust, and the kind of partnership she had always dreamed of. The sun streamed through the window of Emily's home, illuminating a scene of joyful chaos. Ella and Victoria, now toddlers, giggled as they chased each other around the living room. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, laughing as Ella wobbled and fell into her lap. Victoria clutched a stuffed bunny, her curls bouncing as she toddled after her sister. From the kitchen, Mia called out, "Don't forget to pack the snacks, you know how they get when they're hungry." Emily glanced at the clock and hurried to gather the girls' things. It was a big day, her first public lecture as a visiting professor at a prestigious university. The topic: empowering women to reclaim their lives and define their own paths, regardless of societal expectations. Ryan appeared in the doorway, holding two brightly colored sippy cups. "Snacks check, drinks check, anything else?" Emily smiled at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Just you," she said, leaning up to kiss his cheek. Ryan had become a fixture in their lives, seamlessly blending into their family. His quiet strength and unwavering support were a stark contrast to the turbulence Emily had once endured. At the university auditorium, Emily stood behind the podium, the buzz of the audience filling the air. She took a deep breath, scanning the room. This was her moment, a culmination of years of struggle, growth, and triumph. "My name is Emily Carter," she began, her voice steady. "And for a long time I let others define my worth. But today I stand here as a mother, a professor, and a woman who reclaimed her life." The audience hung on her every word as she recounted her journey, her toxic marriage, her decision to pursue motherhood alone, and the joy of raising her daughters. She spoke of the power of self-belief, the importance of support systems, and the freedom that came with letting go of the past. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Ryan and Mia stood in the back, holding Ella and Victoria, their pride evident. Emily locked eyes with them and smiled, her heart full. Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Emily reflected on how far she had come. Ella and Victoria babbled happily, their small hands reaching for pieces of fruit. Ryan sat beside her, his arm resting casually on the back of her chair. Mia raised her glass of sparkling water. "To Emily," she said with a grin, "and to a future that's even brighter than the present." Emily laughed, clinking her glass against Mia's. "To all of us," she said, "because I wouldn't be here without you." Meanwhile, across town, Nathan sat alone in his office, the glow of his computer screen highlighting the lines of weariness on his face. His foundation had grown rapidly, helping countless families navigate the challenges of infertility, but no amount of success could fill the void left by his mistakes. On his desk sat a framed photo of him and Emily from their wedding day, long since packed away but never forgotten. He picked it up, his thumb brushing over her face. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty room. Despite his efforts to move forward, Nathan knew that some wounds would never fully heal. But he resolved to continue his work, hoping that, in some small way, he could prevent others from making the same mistakes. Back at home, Emily tucked Ella and Victoria into bed. their tiny hands clutching their favorite stuffed animals. She leaned down, pressing a kiss to each of their foreheads. "Good night, my loves," she whispered, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. As she stepped out of the nursery, she found Ryan waiting for her in the hallway. He held out his hand, and she took it, their fingers intertwining effortlessly. They walked to the porch, where the stars shone brightly against the night sky. Emily leaned into Ryan's side, her head resting on his shoulder. "I never thought life could feel this full," she admitted, her voice soft. Ryan kissed the top of her head. "You deserve it, Emily, every bit of it." For the first time, Emily truly believed him. She had faced heartbreak, rejection, and doubt, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Her life was far from perfect, but it was hers, and it was beautiful. As the night wrapped its arms around them, Emily closed her eyes, letting herself savor the moment. She was a mother, a professor, a partner, and above all, a woman who had rebuilt her life on her own terms. And in that quiet, starlit moment, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.